"Get out," Ryan Whitmore said. And in that instant, Abigail Foster realized that the mansion glowing behind her was never a home at all. The words cut deeper than the cold rain soaking through her coat because they sounded so ordinary, so calm, as if he were asking her to leave a dinner party instead of walking away from a marriage. 8 months pregnant, exhausted, and standing beneath the towering stone archway of Whitmore Estate, Abigail stared at the man she had loved for 3 years and wondered when exactly he had become a stranger. The storm rolled across the Connecticut coastline like a living thing. Wind rattled the iron gates. Rain hammered the driveway. Somewhere in the darkness, thunder growled across the sky. Ryan didn't flinch. He simply adjusted the cuff of his expensive jacket and looked at her with the detached expression of a businessman ending an unprofitable contract. "You heard me," he said. "This is over." Abigail felt her throat tighten, not because she was surprised. Deep down, she had sensed something breaking for months. The late-night meetings, the unexplained trips, the way his eyes slid past her instead of meeting hers. But she had never imagined it would end like this. Alone, in a storm, carrying his child. "Ryan," she whispered, "please tell me what happened." For a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Guilt, regret, maybe even fear. Then it vanished. "Nothing happened," he replied. "That's the problem." The front door opened behind him. A woman stepped into the warm glow spilling from the foyer. Vanessa Caldwell. Elegant, perfectly composed. Her blonde hair framed a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Abigail's stomach dropped. Not because Vanessa was there. Because Vanessa looked comfortable. Like someone who already belonged. Ryan glanced over his shoulder at her, and something passed silently between them. That single look answered questions Abigail had been afraid to ask. The rain intensified. Water streamed down the marble steps. Abigail wrapped both arms around herself, protecting the small life growing inside her. The baby shifted, a gentle reminder that she wasn't alone. She wanted to turn around. She wanted to walk away. But one question rooted her in place. "How long?" she asked. Neither of them answered immediately. Vanessa lowered her eyes. Ryan exhaled slowly, and that silence told Abigail everything she needed to know. Months, maybe longer. Far longer than she wanted to imagine. Thunder cracked overhead. Somewhere beyond the estate walls, headlights glimmered briefly through the rain before disappearing again. Abigail never noticed them. She never noticed the black Lincoln parked across the street beneath a row of towering oak trees. And she certainly never noticed the man sitting inside it. A man gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. A man who had arrived unexpectedly only minutes earlier. A man who had witnessed every second of what was happening. Daniel Foster watched through rain-speckled glass as his daughter stood alone beneath the storm. He should have stepped out immediately. Any father would have. Yet something stopped him. Because in the brief moment before Ryan turned away, Daniel saw something strange. Not confidence. Not relief. Fear. Real fear. And it raised a question that would change everything. What was Ryan Whitmore so afraid Abigail might discover? As lightning illuminated the estate, Daniel glanced toward a sealed folder resting on the passenger seat beside him. A folder he had received that morning from an anonymous source. A folder containing information that made no sense. Information connecting Ryan Whitmore to something far bigger than a failing marriage. And as the storm raged around them, Daniel realized tonight wasn't the end of Abigail's story. It was the beginning of a mystery nobody saw coming. The first contraction was not what frightened Abigail. It was the silence. Ryan had already gone back inside. Vanessa was gone too. The enormous front door closed behind them, sealing away the warmth, the lights, and 3 years of memories as if none of it had ever existed. Abigail stood motionless for several seconds while rain ran down her face. She could not tell where the storm ended and her tears began. Then another wave of discomfort tightened across her stomach. Not sharp, not overwhelming, just enough to remind her that she was carrying far more than heartbreak into the night. She took a slow breath and forced herself toward the driveway. One step, then another. The estate stretched across nearly 6 acres, and the main gate felt impossibly far away. Her phone battery had died hours earlier. Ryan had promised they would spend the evening together. She remembered charging it halfway that morning before becoming distracted by nursery plans and a list of baby names she had hoped they would discuss over dinner. Now the thought felt almost absurd. The wind pushed against her coat as she walked. Every few feet, she glanced back at the mansion. Part of her still expected Ryan to come running out, to apologize, to explain that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But the house remained silent. Dark windows stared back at her like empty eyes. Across the street, Daniel Foster watched every step. He saw the way she placed one hand protectively over her stomach. He saw her shoulders trembling against the cold. Most of all, he saw the strength she did not realize she possessed. Abigail had always been stronger than she believed. Even as a child, she had hidden pain behind a smile, determined not to burden anyone else. It was a trait Daniel admired and feared at the same time. His phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. The message came from a private investigator he had trusted for nearly 15 years. 3 simple words appeared. Check page 17. Daniel frowned. He reached for the sealed folder on the passenger seat. Rain tapped against the windshield as he opened it carefully. Most of the documents were financial records. Complex transactions. Corporate transfers. Numbers moving through companies that seemed unrelated on the surface. Nothing that immediately explained why someone had anonymously sent the package. Then he found page 17. His expression changed instantly. Daniel read the page once. Then again. The information should not have been possible. Ryan Whitmore had publicly claimed to own 70% of Whitmore Technologies. According to this document, he controlled far less. Someone else had quietly acquired a significant stake through a network of shell companies over the last 18 months. Someone whose identity remained hidden. Daniel looked toward the mansion. Suddenly, the fear he had seen in Ryan's eyes made more sense. This was not merely a marriage falling apart. Something much larger was unfolding beneath the surface. A flash of lightning illuminated the road. Daniel looked up just in time to see Abigail stumble slightly near the gate. Instantly, he opened the car door and stepped into the rain. For the first time that night, he stopped being an observer. Abigail heard approaching footsteps and turned sharply. Through the storm, she saw a tall figure moving toward her. For one terrifying second, she feared Ryan had changed his mind for the worse. Then the headlights revealed a familiar face. Her breath caught. "Dad?" she whispered. Daniel Foster removed his coat and gently placed it around her shoulders. His voice remained calm, steady, almost impossibly controlled. "You are not alone tonight, Abby." And for the first time since the front door had closed behind her, Abigail finally felt safe. Abigail did not realize how exhausted she was until she sat inside the warmth of her father's car. The rain continued pounding against the roof, but it sounded distant now, like a problem belonging to someone else's life. Daniel handed her a bottle of water and waited quietly. He had spent decades in courtrooms learning that people revealed more truth in silence than they ever did under pressure. Abigail stared through the windshield. The mansion had disappeared behind sheets of rain. For the first time all night, she allowed herself to ask the question she had been avoiding. "Did you know?" she said softly. Daniel glanced at her. "Know what?" "That my marriage was falling apart." The answer came too slowly. Abigail noticed. Daniel exhaled. "I knew something was wrong." She laughed bitterly. "That means yes." Neither spoke for several seconds. The dashboard clock glowed 10:42 p.m. Somewhere in the distance, a siren echoed through the storm. Abigail lowered her eyes to her stomach. The baby shifted again, almost as if listening. "Everyone knew except me," she whispered. "I kept making excuses for him." Daniel looked at his daughter and saw the same little girl who used to defend classmates who treated her poorly because she believed everyone deserved another chance. It was one of the reasons people loved Abigail. It was also one of the reasons people underestimated her. "You loved your husband," Daniel said. "That is not a crime." Abigail nodded but said nothing. Her attention drifted to the folder resting beside him. "What is that?" she asked. Daniel's expression changed instantly, just enough for her to notice. "Work." That was a terrible lie. For the first time that evening, a faint smile appeared on Daniel's face. "Still too smart for your own good." Abigail reached toward the folder. Daniel stopped her gently. Not forcefully, just enough to make his point clear. "Not yet." The answer only deepened her curiosity. "Dad, what is going on?" Daniel looked through the rain-covered windshield. He had spent the last 3 hours reviewing documents that should not exist. Financial transfers, corporate acquisitions, hidden ownership structures. The deeper he looked, the less sense the story became. One fact kept bothering him more than any other. Whoever was secretly acquiring shares of Whitmore Technologies possessed extraordinary resources. Yet they had never attempted a takeover. They had simply waited, patiently, quietly, watching, almost like a hunter. "I think your marriage may be connected to something bigger," Daniel finally said. Abigail frowned. "Bigger than Ryan asking me to leave?" "Much bigger." Before she could respond, Daniel's phone rang. Both of them looked at the screen. The caller ID displayed only a private number. Daniel hesitated, then answered. "This is Foster." Silence greeted him. Not static, not interference. Someone breathing, listening. Then a calm male voice spoke. "You opened the folder." Daniel's eyes narrowed instantly. Abigail felt tension fill the car. "Who is this?" Daniel asked. The caller ignored the question. "If you care about your daughter, do not trust anything Ryan Whitmore tells you from this point forward." The line went silent again. Daniel's grip tightened around the phone. "What does that mean?" he demanded. No answer came. A second later, the call disconnected. Abigail stared at him. "Who was that?" Daniel slowly lowered the phone. The storm outside suddenly felt insignificant compared to the storm now building inside the car. "I do not know," he admitted. Then he looked at the folder. For the first time all night, genuine concern crossed his face. Because whoever had called knew he had opened the documents. And that meant someone had been watching long before tonight began. Daniel did not start the engine right away. The disconnected call lingered in the air like an unanswered question. Abigail could see it in his eyes. The man who had spent decades making decisions under pressure was unsettled. That frightened her more than the anonymous voice ever could. "Tell me exactly what is in that folder," she said quietly. Daniel looked at her for several seconds before answering. "I cannot explain it yet because I do not fully understand it myself." Abigail folded her arms. "That is not an answer. It is the truth." Another contraction tightened briefly across her stomach. Not severe, just enough to remind both of them that time was moving forward whether they were ready or not. Daniel noticed immediately. "We are going to the hospital." "I am fine." "Abigail." His tone ended the discussion. 20 minutes later, they pulled beneath the covered entrance of St. Matthew Medical Center. Rain streamed off the roof in silver curtains while nurses hurried between automatic doors. Daniel parked and helped his daughter inside. The bright lights of the lobby felt almost unreal after the darkness of the storm. Abigail checked in while Daniel remained several feet away, watching everything. Years as a federal judge had trained him to notice details. Tonight his instincts would not quiet down. Twice he caught the same man glancing toward them from across the waiting area. Mid-40s. Gray jacket. Baseball cap. Nothing remarkable except the fact that he seemed more interested in Daniel than in the television mounted on the wall above him. When Daniel looked directly at him, the man immediately stood and walked away. The movement lasted only seconds, yet it left an uncomfortable feeling behind. Abigail returned holding a clipboard. "They want to monitor me for a few hours." Daniel nodded. "Good." As they followed a nurse down a long hallway, his phone vibrated again. This time it was a text message. No name, no number, just a blocked sender. 3 words appeared on the screen. "Check the signature." Daniel stopped walking. His pulse quickened. The signature. Instantly his mind returned to the folder. He remembered one particular document near the back. A corporate authorization form. At the time it seemed insignificant compared to the financial records. Now he was not so sure. He waited until Abigail disappeared into an examination room before opening the folder again. His eyes moved quickly through the pages until he found the document. Then he froze. A signature sat at the bottom. Elegant. Precise. Familiar. Daniel stared at it in disbelief. He had seen that signature before. Hundreds of times. Not recently. Years ago. Long before Ryan Whitmore ever entered Abigail's life. Long before Whitmore Technologies became a billion-dollar company. The signature belonged to a man named Victor Hale. Daniel felt a chill despite the warmth of the hospital corridor. Victor Hale had supposedly died 8 years earlier. His death had made national headlines because he was one of the most influential investors on the East Coast. Yet according to this document, someone using his name had authorized a transaction only 6 months ago. That was impossible, unless Victor Hale was not dead, or someone wanted the world to believe he was. Daniel's phone vibrated once more. Another message. Same blocked sender. This one was even shorter. 2 words. Ask Ryan. Daniel slowly lowered the phone. For the first time, the mystery was beginning to take shape. Because if Victor Hale was somehow connected to the hidden ownership of Whitmore Technologies, Then Ryan was not merely involved. He was standing at the center of something far bigger than a collapsing marriage. And somewhere inside the hospital, while Abigail believed her greatest loss was the husband she had just left behind, an entirely different story was quietly beginning to emerge. Abigail expected to feel relief once the doctors assured her that both she and the baby were stable. Instead, she felt strangely empty. The examination room was quiet except for the steady hum of medical equipment and the distant sounds of nurses moving through the corridor. She sat on the edge of the bed staring at a tiny plastic hospital bracelet resting on the tray beside her. The sight of it made everything feel real. Just a few hours earlier, she had been planning a nursery. Now she was trying to understand how her entire future had unraveled in a single night. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Daniel stepped inside carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her before taking a seat nearby. Neither spoke immediately. Abigail studied her father carefully. He looked calm on the surface, but she knew him too well. Whenever Daniel became unusually quiet, it meant his mind was working through something important. "You found something else," she said. It was not a question. Daniel looked down at his coffee. "Maybe." Abigail sighed. "You have been saying maybe all night." "Because I do not have enough answers yet." "Then tell me the questions." Daniel considered that. Finally, he nodded. "The biggest question is why someone wants me involved." Abigail frowned. "What do you mean?" Daniel leaned forward slightly. "The folder, the phone calls, the messages. None of that happened by accident. Someone is guiding me towards something." Before Abigail could respond, another knock sounded at the door. This time a nurse entered carrying a tablet. "Miss Foster, someone dropped this off at the front desk about 20 minutes ago. They said it belonged to you." Abigail stared at the object. It was her tablet, the same one she had left at the mansion. Her confusion deepened. "Who brought it?" The nurse shook her head. "Security could not identify them. They left immediately." The moment the nurse departed, Daniel's attention sharpened. "Open it." Abigail hesitated. Then she powered on the device. The screen lit up instantly. No passcode request. No lock screen. Instead, a video file filled the display. Neither of them recognized it. The timestamp showed it had been uploaded less than an hour earlier. Abigail pressed play. The footage began with security camera video from inside Whitmore Technologies headquarters. The quality was grainy but clear enough to identify people. Ryan appeared on screen, entering a private conference room. A second figure followed moments later. Abigail's breath caught. It was Victor Hale. Not a photograph. Not an old recording. Victor Hale walking through a hallway 6 months ago. Alive. Daniel stared in disbelief. Every newspaper in America had reported his death 8 years earlier. Yet there he was. The recording continued for only 30 seconds before cutting abruptly to black. Then a message appeared. For simple words. "Follow the board meeting." Silence filled the room. Abigail looked at her father. Daniel looked back at her. Neither knew what to say. The mystery surrounding Ryan was no longer theoretical. They had just watched proof with their own eyes. Abigail's phone suddenly vibrated on the bedside table. Unknown number. Her pulse quickened. Slowly she answered. "Hello." For several seconds nobody spoke. Then a familiar voice emerged. "Ryan." "Abigail," he said quietly. "You need to leave that hospital immediately." Every muscle in her body tensed. "Why?" she asked. The pause that followed felt endless. When Ryan finally answered, his voice sounded nothing like the confident man she had known for years. It sounded afraid. "Because they know where you are now." The line went silent before Abigail could ask another question. She stared at the phone in disbelief. Ryan had ended the call. No explanation. No apology. Just a warning that somehow made everything feel worse. Daniel immediately took the phone from her hand. He examined the number. Blocked. Untraceable. What did he mean? Abigail asked. Daniel did not answer right away. His attention had shifted toward the hallway outside the room. The anonymous caller. The folder. Victor Hale. The mysterious video. Now Ryan's warning. Each piece seemed disconnected on its own. Together they formed a pattern he could almost see but not yet understand. "Dad." Abigail's voice pulled him back. "Tell me what you were thinking." Daniel lowered the phone slowly. "I think Ryan is scared." Abigail let out a bitter laugh. "Good." "No," Daniel replied. "You do not understand. Men like Ryan Whitmore do not scare easily." The words settled heavily between them. A soft knock interrupted the conversation. The attending physician entered carrying a chart and a reassuring smile. After a brief examination, she confirmed that Abigail and the baby remained stable. It should have been comforting news. Instead, Abigail found herself watching the door every few seconds. The hospital room no longer felt safe. Once the doctor left, Daniel crossed to the window overlooking the parking garage below. Rain still fell steadily across the city. Emergency lights reflected off wet pavement. People moved in and out of the building without realizing that a much stranger drama was unfolding above them. Then Daniel noticed something. A black SUV sat parked beneath a street lamp near the far corner of the lot. Nothing unusual at first glance. Yet over the next 10 minutes, it never moved. Nobody entered. Nobody exited. The engine remained running. Daniel's instincts sharpened immediately. His phone vibrated. Another message from the blocked sender. This time there was only one sentence. They are already inside. Daniel felt a chill move through him. He looked back toward Abigail. She was unaware of the message, focused instead on adjusting the hospital blanket across her lap. For the first time that night, Daniel made a decision. He opened his contacts and selected a number he had not called in almost 3 years. The answer came on the second ring. Daniel Foster. That is a surprise. The voice belonged to Evelyn Cross, former director of federal investigations and one of the few people Daniel trusted completely. I need a favor, Daniel said. Tonight. There was a brief pause. That's serious? More serious. 20 minutes later, a woman in her early 60s walked calmly through the hospital corridor carrying a visitor badge. Her silver hair was pulled back neatly. Her eyes missed nothing. Abigail recognized her immediately from old family gatherings. Aunt Evelyn. Evelyn smiled gently. Not really your aunt. But I never had the heart to correct you. Despite everything, Abigail smiled for the first time that night. The moment lasted only seconds. Evelyn's expression quickly turned professional. She pulled Daniel aside and handed him a small envelope. You were right to call me, she said quietly. I checked Victor Hale before coming here. Daniel's face tightened. And Evelyn glanced toward Abigail to make sure she could not hear. Then she delivered the sentence that changed everything. Victor Hale did not die 8 years ago. Daniel stared at her. Evelyn nodded once. His death certificate was real. The funeral was real. But the body in the casket was not Victor Hale. As thunder rolled outside the hospital windows, Daniel realized the mystery had just become far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. For several seconds, Daniel could not speak. He had spent years weighing evidence, separating facts from speculation, but Evelyn Cross was not a woman who dealt in rumors. If she said Victor Hale had not died, she had a reason. How certain are you? Daniel asked quietly. Evelyn folded her arms. Certain enough that I drove across the city in the middle of a storm. Abigail watched the exchange from the hospital bed. Every answer seemed to create 3 new questions. Who is Victor Hale? She finally asked. Daniel and Evelyn exchanged a brief look. Evelyn answered first. 20 years ago, Victor Hale was one of the most influential investors in America. Politicians wanted his support. Corporations wanted his money. Then one day he disappeared. Abigail frowned. People disappear all the time. Not billionaires, Evelyn replied. The room fell silent. Outside, rain continued tapping against the windows. Inside, the mystery was becoming impossible to ignore. Daniel opened the envelope Evelyn had brought. Several photographs slid onto the small table beside him. Most appeared ordinary at first glance. Business conferences, charity events, corporate gatherings. Then Abigail noticed something strange. The dates. Every photograph had been taken within the last 2 years. And in every single one, the same unidentified man appeared somewhere in the background. Different clothes, different cities, different angles, but the same face. Who is he? Abigail asked. Evelyn pointed to the image. That is Victor Hale. Abigail blinked. The man looked older than she expected. Gray hair, glasses. Nothing about him resembled the powerful financial titan described in newspapers. He looked ordinary, invisible even. Daniel studied the photographs carefully. Why stay hidden? Evelyn shook her head. That is the question nobody can answer. Before anyone could continue, a news alert flashed across the television mounted on the wall. The volume was muted, but the headline immediately caught Daniel's attention. Whitmore Technologies announces emergency board meeting. The 3 of them stared at the screen. The report continued scrolling beneath the headline. Investors expected a major corporate announcement within 48 hours. Analysts predicted a record-breaking merger. Abigail felt her stomach tighten. Ryan never mentioned any merger. Daniel's expression darkened. Because he probably could not. Evelyn stepped closer to the television. Look at the timing. The anonymous video told us to follow the board meeting. Now this appears. Daniel nodded slowly. The pieces were moving. Someone wanted them paying attention to Whitmore Technologies. The question was why. His phone buzzed again. Another blocked message. This time it contained only a photograph. Daniel opened it instantly. The image showed the hospital parking garage from above. Security camera footage. A timestamp in the corner confirmed it had been captured less than 5 minutes earlier. Daniel zoomed in. The black SUV was still there. But now 2 additional vehicles had arrived. All 3 were positioned facing the hospital entrance. Abigail saw the color drain from her father's face. "What is it?" she asked. Daniel turned the screen toward Evelyn. She examined the image for only a moment before her expression hardened. "Those are not random visitors." Abigail's pulse quickened. "Then who are they?" Evelyn looked directly at her. "That is what worries me." A sudden knock echoed through the room. Everyone turned toward the door. A man wearing hospital scrubs stepped inside, carrying a clipboard. He smiled politely. "Miss Foster." Abigail nodded cautiously. The man glanced at the chart, then at her wristband. Everything appeared normal. Routine. Yet Daniel immediately sensed something was wrong. Because the visitor badge clipped to the man's pocket displayed a hospital logo. And beneath it, a name. Victor Hale. For a moment nobody moved. The man standing in the doorway appeared completely ordinary. Mid-50s. Average height. Hospital scrubs. Reading glasses resting on his collar. Yet the name clipped to his badge seemed to drain all the air from the room. Victor Hale. Abigail looked from the badge to the photographs spread across the table. The face matched perfectly. Daniel rose slowly from his chair. Years of courtroom discipline kept his expression controlled, but his pulse was racing. The man glanced around the room and immediately noticed the reaction he had caused. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled. "Good," he said calmly. "That saves me a great deal of explaining." Evelyn stepped forward. "You are Victor Hale." It was not a question. The man nodded. "Yes." Abigail felt as though she had stepped into someone else's life. Only hours earlier her biggest concern had been her marriage. Now a supposedly dead billionaire was standing in her hospital room. "Why are you here?" Daniel asked. Victor's expression softened as he looked toward Abigail. Because she was never supposed to be involved. The answer created even more confusion. Daniel folded his arms. "Start talking." Victor closed the door behind him before speaking. "Everything happening right now began 9 years ago. Long before Ryan Whitmore became Chief Executive Officer. Long before Whitmore Technologies became one of the fastest-growing companies in America." He glanced toward the television where news coverage of the upcoming board meeting continued to scroll across the screen. That company was built on a secret partnership. Daniel exchanged a look with Evelyn. Victor continued. "Ryan knows part of the story. He does not know all of it." Abigail frowned. "Then tell us." Victor nodded slowly. 9 years ago, I discovered evidence of a financial scheme involving several powerful investors. The money itself was not the problem. The people behind it were. They had influence everywhere. Politics, banking, technology, media. His voice remained calm, but the seriousness behind it was unmistakable. The moment I started asking questions, I became a target. Daniel understood immediately. "So you disappeared." Victor smiled faintly. "I survived." Silence settled over the room. Rain continued tapping against the windows. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped steadily. The ordinary sounds of a hospital felt strangely disconnected from the extraordinary conversation taking place inside. "What does any of this have to do with Ryan?" Abigail asked. Victor looked at her carefully before answering. "Because Ryan inherited something he never wanted." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Meaning?" Victor reached into his pocket and removed a small flash drive. "Meaning the board meeting tomorrow is not about a merger." He placed the drive on the table. "It is about ownership." Evelyn leaned forward. "The hidden shares." Victor nodded. "Exactly." Daniel immediately thought of the documents inside the folder. The anonymous messages. The secret acquisitions. Suddenly the pieces began aligning. "Someone has been buying control of Whitmore Technologies," he said. Victor smiled. "Not someone." Abigail stared at him. "Who?" Victor looked directly at her. "You." The room went completely silent. Abigail blinked. "That is impossible." Victor shook his head. No, it is simply hidden. Daniel stared at him in disbelief. Evelyn looked equally stunned. Abigail laughed nervously, convinced she had misunderstood. I do not own any company. Victor's expression never changed. Actually, Abigail, through a trust established before your marriage, you currently control more voting shares of Whitmore Technologies than Ryan Whitmore does. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath everything he thought he understood. And for the first time since the storm began, Abigail realized the night Ryan had sent her away might not have been about ending a marriage at all. It might have been about keeping her from discovering who she truly was. Abigail stared at Victor Hale as if he had spoken a different language. The words made no sense. She owned more of Whitmore Technologies than Ryan did. The claim was impossible, yet nobody in the room was laughing. Daniel looked stunned. Evelyn looked concerned. Victor looked certain. There has to be some mistake, Abigail said quietly. Victor shook his head. There is not. He slid a document from the flash drive package and handed it to Daniel. Your daughter became the beneficiary of a protected trust 7 years ago. The shares were divided across multiple holding companies specifically to keep them hidden. Daniel scanned the page. Every line confirmed what Victor had said. Abigail's name appeared repeatedly. Trust agreements, voting rights, ownership percentages. The evidence was undeniable. Abigail sank back against the hospital bed. Suddenly, dozens of memories felt different. The unexplained financial advisors who occasionally contacted her. The legal documents she signed years earlier after her mother's passing. The letters she never bothered reading because she assumed they were routine estate paperwork. Ryan knew? She asked. Victor answered immediately. Not at first. But he discovered the truth months ago. The room fell silent. Abigail felt a sharp ache in her chest. Not because of the company. Because for the first time she understood why Ryan's behavior had changed. The distance. The secrecy. The fear Daniel had seen in his eyes. None of it had started with another woman. It had started with a secret. Her phone suddenly vibrated. Ryan's name appeared on the screen. Nobody spoke. Abigail answered. Ryan. His voice sounded exhausted. Thank God. Abigail closed her eyes. Tell me the truth. Silence. Then a long breath. I wanted to. When? She asked. Before everything got out of control. Abigail laughed sadly. You are going to have to be more specific. Ryan did not argue. For the first time since she had known him, he sounded like a man carrying a burden he could no longer hide. The board meeting tomorrow is not a merger announcement, he admitted. It is a vote. Daniel and Victor exchanged looks. Ryan continued. Someone has spent years positioning ownership shares through shell companies. If the vote happens, control of the company changes permanently. Abigail looked at Victor. To me. Ryan's silence confirmed it. You knew, she whispered. Yes. The answer hurt more than she expected. Not because he had discovered the secret. Because he had never trusted her with it. Why did you not tell me? She asked. Ryan's voice cracked slightly. Because once I understood what was happening, I realized people were watching everyone connected to the company. Including you. Abigail remembered the anonymous messages. The vehicles outside. The strange visitors. Suddenly none of it seemed random. So you pushed me away to protect me? She asked. Another pause followed. At first. The answer hung in the air. At first. Not forever. Not completely. Somewhere along the way fear had become deception. Abigail understood that now. The line remained quiet for several seconds. Finally Ryan spoke again. There is one more thing you need to know. Daniel's attention sharpened instantly. Victor Hale is not your enemy. Abigail looked toward Victor. Ryan continued. The real problem is the person who built the trust. Confusion spread across the room. Even Victor frowned. What are you talking about? Abigail asked. Ryan's answer changed everything. The trust was not created by Victor Hale. Thunder rolled across the city as Ryan spoke the next words. It was created by your mother. The room went completely still. Because Abigail's mother had been gone for 7 years. And somehow she had just become the most important person in the entire story.